So today I'm going to discuss one of my absolute favorite films of all time, Bram Stoker's Dracula from 1992, directed by Francis Ford Coppola. I don't remember exactly how I came to know about the Dracula mythology. Maybe one of my friends told me the story, maybe one of my teachers told me the story, maybe I caught glimpses of it on TV. I don't exactly remember, but I remember always being obsessed by Dracula and generally movie monsters in general. I really loved them because, yeah, I think that the first film that my parents took me to was a Malayalam horror film called Manichitra Tara, and maybe it's because of that I've always been obsessed with horror, yakshis, and monster movies. And it is no surprise that I absolutely was adamant about watching all of the Dracula movies that I could get my hands on. And by far my favorite is the 1992 Bram Stoker's Dracula, not just because it's a great film, but also because of the nostalgic value, because that was the year I was born. The movie, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, is probably the one that is most faithful to Bram Stoker's novel, which I did read several times. It's again one of my favorite books. I remember reading it when I was 12 or 13 when I was in school and being absolutely in love with the material. Even though it's quite a big book for a young Indian kid to read, where English is not our first language, it's not even our second language, it's our third language. So, yeah, it was quite a challenge, but I really enjoyed it, even though the Victorian language sometimes confused me. I think it was Victorian, to be honest. Was it Victorian? I don't remember. And I've seen a lot of the Dracula movies that have been made in Hollywood, and most of them don't take the character exactly from the books. The stories are manipulated, some of the characters are mixed together, some of the plot elements are completely removed, and it's the movies are always very independent from the books, and this version is, I think, the one that is most uh, honest and related to the book, in that it tells the story of the book but then adds on to that and expands the mythology a little bit instead of telling a completely different story that is based on the books. What I love about this movie in particular is the look of the movie, because it's such a unique, a completely envisioned and lived in universe. It feels real, it feels tangible, it feels honest. I don't know if these words are the right words to use, but those are the words that come to my mind. The way Roman Coppola, who is Francis Ford Coppola's son, has used lighting and the real effects instead of computer generated imagery, practical effects to bring everything to the screen, is, I think, that helps this movie stand the test of time, because some of the effects from early 90s, they don't hold up today, but because everything was done practically in this movie, it stands the test of time and it is enjoyable regardless of the age you see it in. And you can, every time you watch it, if you watch it the first time as a child, you enjoy it for the monsters and the story and that aspect of it, and as you grow you learn to appreciate the craft behind it, and as you grow older you take in more details, and the amount of heart that went in to make this film is apparent, and that's one of the things that I absolutely love about it. There is a feel about this movie that feels very, very uniquely Eastern European. I think that's the feel that is evoked, particularly by the visuals and the music in particular. The soundtrack by Uchish Kilar, it's absolutely stunning. It's one of my absolute favorite soundtracks of all time as well. I sometimes play it to annoy my roommate because he gets scared by it, I guess. Yeah. So all this evokes that particular Transylvanian Eastern European atmosphere that is missing from a lot of the other remakes. The closest I think another movie comes to that particular aspect is Nosferatu, the 1920 silent version of the film, which I really liked too because it was really creepy, but it's not really Dracula, but it is Dracula. The acting in the film is, uh, it has its ebbs and flows, I must say, because some of the casting decisions are questionable. The absolute standout in the film is obviously Gary Oldman as Dracula. This version of Dracula gets to go through the transformation. We start out seeing the really old, ancient, dilapidated version of Dracula with the buns on his head, and then we move into the scary version of Dracula as the werewolf, and then we see the younger Dracula walking around London. And that's a really nice touch because typically vampires in vampire movies we don't see them out in the day, but in the original Bram Stoker's Dracula we see them walking out in the day, and it's just that they're not as powerful during the day as they would be at night and things like that. So it's good to get those uh, little little things from the original novel to be represented in the movie. And Anthony Hopkins is, as always, brilliant. I really like the fact that he is the narrator of the piece, and he appears in the old story as one of the priests, the head priests, and then in the present as Van Helsing, Dr. Van Helsing, which creates the through line that their family might have been vampire hunters throughout history. It's just a hint of it. It's not stated overtly, but the way he acts and is presented, it gives that feel. Eiko Ishioka's costumes, I must say, are some of the best things about the movie because I believe that Coppola spent a large amount of the budget on the costumes, and it shows. The costumes are so vibrant, so weird and original, and they are a character in the movie itself. Yes, I particularly love Dracula's red coat, the flowing coat. It's, I think, one of the standout pieces. And then I also love the gold embellished burial gown that he sleeps in his castle. I really love that piece as well. And all of the costumes in the movies are real standouts, and it's a real thrill to watch the characters use the costumes to flesh out the characters, and all the visual effects, the sound effects, all of it works together to give you that particular atmosphere that is very unique and very interesting in this movie. Now, talking about the weak spots, the obvious weak spot is Keanu Reeves as Jonathan Harker and his English accent. I don't think it's an English accent at all. I mean, as a child, I did not object to it too much because, as you can see, I learned English from watching movies, so my accent is also not quite British, not quite English, not quite American. It's neither here nor there, so I can't really complain about it. But he is an actor. He could have gone to acting coaches and learned the proper British accent, and he didn't. Maybe he did, but the attempt was a feeble one at best. And watching it as an adult, it does take you out of the scenes when you watch him struggle so hard with the accent because, yeah. Interesting fact, I read somewhere that the original casting choice for the role was Johnny Depp, but instead he chose to do What's Wrong with Gilbert Grape or something like that. I don't remember the exact title of the film, even though I have watched it. He chose to do that film, and I think he would have been a much better uh, cast for this particular character. And if he had been in this movie, it could have been a very different movie because Jonathan Harker should have been one of the strongest points of the movie, but he isn't. That's a little wobbly. Winona Ryder is competent, I would say. She's a really good actress, but again, I think it was too much of her to do the English accent and do the acting because she has to do a lot of heavy lifting. She does the acting really well, but the accent comes and goes. She's kind of like the Madonna of this film. All the other supporting characters are really greatly done. I particularly like the character of Quincy Morris because we don't usually see Quincy Morris in any of the other Dracula adaptations. So I really love that he was present because he is one of the loveliest characters in the book. And Harker and Mina named their child after him. So he should have been in the films, but it's good to see. I think his name is Billy Campbell, do justice to the character, and I really loved it. The narrative of the story is pretty straightforward from the book. What's unique about the story in this is Dracula is not presented as a monster. He is presented as a fallen angel of sorts. He's a man who dedicated his actual life to the cause of Jesus Christ and his church, and then God failed him. So he goes berserk and takes up with the devil and is cursed because of it. So his existence after that is basically an attempt to desecrate everything that is holy. And yeah, and the through line of the story of him being eternally damned and him yearning for the love of his wife, his lost bride, all of that is beautifully done. I think that really helps the movie in that there's an emotional impact in most of the scenes because of it, because you feel bad for the guy because he was so righteous and so honest and so loving, and then he fell hard, and then he has to crawl his way back out of it. And Mina finally giving him salvation as he dies. It's all done very beautifully, and I think it was the right choice to do that. Some people don't agree that the love story was important. I personally really enjoyed it. So, all in all, I would suggest that anybody who's a fan of film noir or artistically brilliant films, or who love Dracula in general and who want to see the authentic Dracula story told, should watch this film. It's not the greatest film out there, I must say, but it is the best Dracula film out there for me. Even though I have watched the Bela Lugosi version and all the other versions, I still hold that this is the best version of the Dracula story told. The other stories are Dracula films, that they are not the Dracula story. That's just my opinion, and you came here for my opinion, the three of you. So yeah, the film did really well at the box office. It was made for a paltry budget, but it did earn back its budget and quite more. It went on to win 3 Oscars, I believe, and uh, I think this is one of Gary Oldman's finest performances. It's one of my favorite Gary Oldman performances, right up there with Sirius Black and Inspector Gordon. Yeah, so take a look at Dracula by Bram Stoker by the way of Francis Ford Coppola from 1992, because it is brilliant. So if there are any other movies out there that you would like me to comment on, type them below. I might take a look at them and dump on them because I have nothing else to do. So see you next time.